All right, so when you think of Pink Floyd, what comes to mind? Probably these huge, epic, timeless rock anthems, right? But what if I told you their story is really less about music and more about design? That this legendary band was built piece by piece with the precision of an architect.
Just to give you a sense of the sheer scale of what they built, look at this number, 741. That's how many weeks, consecutive weeks, the dark side of the moon was on the Billboard chart. That's, what, over 14 years? It's staggering. It's almost unbelievable, and it tells you right away this was about something way bigger than just a few hit songs.
So yeah, that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? How on earth did a bunch of architecture students, not, seasoned musicians from the club circuit, end up building one of the greatest, most enduring monuments in all of music history?
Okay, so Section 1, Architects of Sound. We're going to see how their background in design theory really kicked off a musical revolution. And to do that, we have to go right back to the beginning, to their foundation, which, funnily enough, wasn't built in some smoky blues club. No, it was built in the lecture halls of a London university.
So get this, the core of the band, that's Roger Waters, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright, they all met studying architecture. And this is so important. Think about it. Their shared language wasn't music theory, it was design. It was structure, form, meticulous planning. It meant they looked at sound through a totally different lens than pretty much anyone else at the time.
And you can see just how much they were searching in those early days. I mean, look at this. Before they landed on Pink Floyd, they were Sigma 6, the Megadeths, the Screaming Abdabs, the T-Set. It was a chaotic, kind of messy period of just throwing things at the wall, trying to find an identity that would stick.
And then that identity finally arrived. It came in the form of this guy, Syd Barrett. He was an art student, a friend of Roger Waters, and he was the spark, the real visionary catalyst they needed. He brought in this whole psychedelic vibe, and most importantly, he gave them their final name, Pink Floyd. Yeah, he actually combined the names of two old blues musicians he loved, Pink Anderson and Floyd Council. Syd was the guy who drew up that first crucial blueprint for what the band would become.
All right, Section 2, the psychedelic blueprint. This is where they start designing these totally immersive experiences. So with Syd's vision now in place, the band really starts building their reputation. They basically become the house band, or you could say the resident architects of the London underground scene. And their main construction site? The legendary UFO Club.
And you have to understand, they weren't just playing psychedelic rock. They were pretty much defining it in real time. For these guys, it was never about just churning out 3-minute pop songs. No. It was about creating these immersive happenings, these total sensory experiences that were designed to just completely transport you, to take your consciousness somewhere else.
And here's how they pulled it off. At the UFO Club, where they were the house band, they built this incredible otherworldly atmosphere. They had these wild liquid light shows, projecting these swirling blobs of oil and ink on the walls. They'd have 16mm films running at the same time, and musically, they'd go off on these super long, sprawling improvisations, like their famous track Interstellar Overdrive. It was a total fusion of sound and vision, a completely immersive world.
Section 3, a tragic collapse. So just as this incredible structure they were building was starting to reach for the sky, a huge crack appeared in the foundation. The visionary architect himself, Syd Barrett, he began to collapse.
And his decline was heartbreakingly public. You'd have these shows where he'd just stop. He'd become totally unresponsive, just staring out into space, into the crowd. Or sometimes he'd just play one single chord all night long. The very creative force that had built the band was now, tragically, the thing that was threatening to tear it all down.
So they brought in another friend, a guy named David Gilmour. At first, just to help Syd out on stage, to cover for him. But it just wasn't sustainable. And this quote from Gilmour, it just says it all. The decision was tragic, but it was necessary. It really captures the impossible situation they were in. They had to make a brutal choice, save the project, or let the whole thing crumble along with its creator.
So, incredibly, Syd's departure didn't actually end the band. Instead, it basically split their history right down the middle. They had to completely rebuild. They went from being a band led by a single, visionary songwriter to a truly collaborative partnership. And their sound shifted, big time, from quirky psychedelic pop to something much, much grander, progressive rock. Okay, on to section 4, forging a new sound. You could think of this next phase as their apprenticeship. It was a period of real searching where the four of them had to figure out, okay, who are we without Syd Barrett? They literally had to forge a whole new musical identity from scratch.
And this timeline here, it really shows that evolution album by album. In '68, with A Saucer Full of Secrets, you can hear them taking their first baby steps into these long, complex songs. By 1970's Atom Heart Mother, they're going full-on prog, even bringing in an orchestra. But the real breakthrough, the moment it all clicks into place, is 1971's Metal. That's where they finally nail that new atmospheric sound.
And the key to it all was one song, Echoes. This 23-minute masterpiece was the absolute culmination of everything they'd been working towards. This was it. This was the final blueprint for the Pink Floyd sound that would conquer the world. Atmospheric, melodic, and just structurally massive. They had finally found their new architecture.
And that brings us to the main event. Section 5, The Dark Side Monument. With the blueprint from Echoes now perfected, they were ready. They were ready to build their ultimate monument, the Dark Side of the Moon.
I mean, just look at the level of engineering that went into this thing. This wasn't just songwriting, this was sound construction. They were building an entire world. For the song Money, they literally made these manual tape loops of clinking coins and cash registers. For On the Run, they used one of the first synthesizers to create that anxious, pulsing rhythm. They even designed the whole album for a 360-degree quadraphonic sound system. And on top of it all, they wove in these haunting little interview snippets they recorded with people at the studio, talking about madness and death. It's just incredible detail.
And then there's the lyrical structure, which Roger Waters was mostly responsible for. It was pure genius. Instead of the old abstract psychedelic stuff, he wrote about things everyone feels, these universal pressures. You've got time, which is all about procrastination and knowing you're going to die. Money, about greed. Us and them, about war and feeling isolated. And of course, brain damage, which was this heartbreaking nod back to Syd and the fragility of the human mind. This is why it connected with tens of millions of people. And the result of all that work? Well, over 45 million copies sold worldwide. That's the result. This one album took them from being a pretty successful prog rock band and launched them into the stratosphere as global megastars. You could say their grand design was a monumental success.
And you know, their architecture wasn't just about the sound. We have to talk about the visuals. A design firm called Hipgnosis created these visual facades for their soundscapes. And these surreal, often anonymous album covers became just as iconic as the music itself. Think about it. The simple, clean prism for Dark Side. The burning man on the cover of Wish You Were Here, symbolizing absence. The flying pig over Battersea Power Station. These weren't just cool pictures. They were the visual blueprints for the feelings and ideas inside the record.
So all of this leaves us with one last question to chew on. They built this incredible sound with an architect's precision, with deep philosophy, with groundbreaking technology. But what is it really about this specific architecture of sound that makes it so timeless? What allows it to stand so strong decades and decades later, still pulling in new listeners, new generations every single year?